me have it.
Welcome to Brew Talks Asheville. I know there's still some folks filtering in and getting their name badges and everything, so we'll let them come in, but we're going to get the program started here to try to keep everything on time tonight. My name is Chris Fernari. I'm the editor of Brewbound, and I'll be your host for the remainder of the evening. We've got a great lineup of speakers. I'm sure you guys already know who's coming out tonight, but Leah Wong-Ashburn from Highland Brewing, Adam Charnack from Highwire Brewing, Jay Richardson from New Belgium, and of course, the wonderful Kim Jordan will be our first guest up here, the co-founder and executive chair of New Belgium Brewing. Big round of applause for them. So I did want to take a brief moment to just give a shout out to our sponsors, without whom this whole event wouldn't be possible, and actually the whole Brew Talk series. We do about 6 of these around the country. So a big shout out to OI, Avery Dennison, Vicinity Brew, Cascade Floors, KGID, Siemens. I think I saw a few of them here tonight. So if you're here and in the crowd, give a holler and say hello to folks. Thank you very much. We truly wouldn't be able to get around the country and live stream this event and bring all our equipment around without them, so thank you. And also a big shout out and a big thank you to New Belgium for hosting us. Their crew has been absolutely fantastic over the last couple days. It is a really, really crazy week for them here. It's their 25th anniversary bash, as I'm sure you all know. They're still kind of fine-tuning this place and getting everything off the ground, and they were gracious enough to let us in to their brand new brew house. Please don't break anything. I don't want to be responsible for that. But thank you guys for having us. This is the second time we've done an event with you this year. You guys were great in Fort Collins, and I hate to say it, but even better here in Asheville, so thank you. And lastly, tonight's program is actually benefiting 2 local nonprofit organizations. So all of the funds raised from ticket sales will be shared evenly with 2 groups, the Asheville Brewers Alliance and the Western North Carolina Communities Group. I don't know how familiar you are with them, but you know, for those folks that are tuning in on the live stream and for folks here that want to know a little bit more, the Asheville Brewers Alliance exists to promote, educate, connect, and advocate for the betterment of the Asheville and Western North Carolina craft brewing community. They have 148 members, including 65 breweries, as well as a wide variety of industry associates and community partners. The Alliance hosts and collaborates to showcase its breweries and produces a variety of educational opportunities and events for craft beer industry insiders as well as the general public. If you guys are interested in learning more about the Asheville Brewers Alliance, please visit avlbrewers.com or contact their executive director, Kendra Penland. I don't know if Kendra's here with us tonight. Oh, she just came in. So she's waving over there. Say hi to her if you guys are interested in learning more about that group. And our second beneficiary tonight is the Western North Carolina Communities Group, and all the proceeds from ticket sales that are being split, obviously, will be going to their Brewers Grain Alliance. The Western North Carolina Communities Group is dedicated to providing a unique forum for leaders in the mountain region of North Carolina to collaborate and implement innovative programs to improve the quality of life for rural communities and to enhance the economy of the agriculture and forestry sectors. And obviously with the rapid growth of breweries in the area, which we'll be talking a little bit about tonight, they developed the WNC Brewers Grain LLC division to connect farmers to brewers and the transportation sector to create an efficient and sustainable access and delivery system. And New Belgium actually supports this effort by supplying their spent grain at a low cost, so area farmers can supplement their feed and source for livestock. So again, if you're interested in more information there, find Mike Ford, who I believe is also here. Mike, there he is, and talk to him, pick his brain. And with everyone's help tonight, we've actually raised more than $3,000 for both of those groups. So big round of applause to you guys. Thank you for helping make that happen. And I'll sit down now and invite Kim Jordan up here to our makeshift stage, I guess. It's a mock stage. Our staging area.
Thanks, Chris. Let's see, am I on here? Nope.
Green. The green microphone. Oh.
Three on?
There we go.
There we go. Thanks. I was told it was hot, so I assumed it was on. Let's see, do I have enough arm? Yeah, I can do that. Okay. I'm all set then.
I had
that
to do
was
the
all
same
I
thing.
needed.
Well, welcome. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And to all of you here, this is one of our very first industry events here, especially in this brew house. And sorry, just a tiny bit of a walk down memory lane for us. Those of you who live in this area know that this was sort of like, they're putting a brewery there? And, I just can't say enough about our team of people and how hard and with so much love that they've worked on doing this. And, we're wildly proud of how it turned out, and we hope that you enjoy it as well. So, and don't break anything. Thanks.
Yeah, it's certainly been quite the long road for you guys since announcing that you would be building a brewery in Asheville in 2012, and took a little longer than expected, and certainly you picked a site that needed a lot of TLC, but I guess, in the spirit of the 25th anniversary, did you ever think we'd be sitting here today inside a massive new brewing facility here in Asheville when you conceived the new Belgium brewing concept 25 years ago in your basement?
Totally. Had it totally planned from the beginning. No, when people ask me about entrepreneurship, I think if you ever imagined at the very beginning that it would look like this later, you'd either think, like, that's crazy. That is, never going to happen. Or you'd think, that sounds like a hell of a lot of work, and I think I'm going to do something else. So it sneaks up on you bit by bit, and you have so many opportunities to make choices for how you want it to shake out. And that's the really fun part about it, is whether it's what hops are we going to use, or the Fat Tire and Friends collaboration, who are we going to work with, or we have the same thing with a bunch of Belgian brewers. They're just thousands of choices that you make along the way that get you to this moment right here, right now.
Right. So obviously, like I said, come a long way in 25 years, and so too has the broader beer segment, the craft beer sector. I mean, both of those have, changed considerably. And I think it's pretty fair to say that you guys are no longer just the Fat Tire Brewery, which I know for many years people just confused the name, thought you were Fat Tire Brewing. You've certainly, I think moved beyond that with the success of products like Citradelic this year, and even the introduction of your new cider. So kudos to you guys for transcending that a little bit. But, I did want to kind of start, before we dive into the real meat of this conversation, just kind of get an update as we, look forward to the fourth quarter here, find out, how you guys are going to finish out 2016, and get your take on sort of the continued evolution of craft this year.
Sure.
So what's the latest?
Well, let me start just by responding to your comment. Let me start by, someone's messing with me. Hey, you back there, knock that off. Your comment about not being the Fat Tire Brewery. I feel like we haven't been that for a really long time. That was certainly, you start out, and again, we were entrepreneurs, and you're not thinking about brand hierarchy. You're thinking, we want to signal that we want to make American interpretations of Belgian-style beers, and the new is to say, kind of how people did. In the old world, it's Belgium, and in the new world, it's New Belgium. And, then having brand names certainly confuse that, but I think that our breadth of portfolio, we've been making wood beer since 1997. People, I think, over time, maybe even as early as 2000, really began to understand that we weren't just the Fat Tire Brewery.
Right. And I guess I just, personally hear fewer people sort of calling it, oh, that's the Fat Tire company, or they make Fat Tire. And I think maybe a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that, you guys have been building out this facility for so many years that, you've created almost a name for New Belgium through that process, because that's what people are talking about, that you've...
This facility here?
Yeah.
That's an interesting take. I would think it is just, the breadth of portfolio and just more familiarity with who we are and what we do.
Sure. So
how's it going?
Yeah, so how's it going?
I got new stats hot off the press, so I had my pal Brian Simpson write them down.
Where's Harry Schumacher? I saw his name.
Is he here?
He's going to be missing out on all the stuff to report tomorrow.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see Harry at some point this weekend. So craft overall is up 5.3 in U.S. grocery, and we're up 9%. Versus a year ago, and that's a 13-week. These are those, sort of geeky measurements that we use in our industry. So many of you, absolutely know what I'm talking about when I say that. One of the things that we're really proud of and excited about is that we are the number 2 true craft brand in the United States right now. So we, that's for us. We don't live and die by those numbers, honestly. It's a nice thing to be like, sweet, we're, things are going well. But we don't say, what's our goal in life, to be bigger than someone else? We have other aspirations for what matters to us and makes us happy. But we also like to win, and we're competitive, and it's nice to feel like, given that we're in 45 states, that we have a beer that is the number 2 craft brand in the United States. So let's give it up for Fat Tire.
Yeah.
And probably actually the most, big exciting news for us this year is Citradelic, which has been the number 1 craft launch of the year. And one of the things that competition does is really make you hungry, and we like to win. And you have to think about, okay, now what are we going to do that's going to be interesting and that beer drinkers are going to like? And, so having Citradelic be the number 1 craft launch for 2016 has been fabulous. And our depletions are, in the mid 20%. And our total depletions year to date are 7%. And so, we're feeling like we're having a banner year, and we're as big as we are, that's always a challenge, and we're friends with all those other people who are being challenged by this as well, and we're excited with our performance and the way that we're showing up in the marketplace.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a lot on the few publicly traded craft brewery calls that we listen into, whether it's CBA or Boston Beer. Just how difficult it is out there for the larger, more established brands. Boston Beer in decline for sure. So it would be easy to sort of compare or benchmark yourselves against some of those numbers, and it sounds like you guys are doing pretty well.
We feel really good about our performance, our plan, our collective effort.
And do you attribute most of that to new market entries or same state growth, or?
It's a mix of everything. Same-state growth is really healthy, and that was something, we have had the luxury compared to Sam Adams and Sierra Nevada to grow into U.S. markets. Lots of craft brewers are doing lots of exporting, which is really, we have just our toes barely into that water at all, because there, you kind of have to look at where our new sources of sales, and we're really not in that world at this point, because we still have some of the United States left to do. And so it's a combo of Citradelic and a real focus on core brands, and really sort of, and I would also say we have a new and energized management team that Christine Parrish is leading, and a really great new sales director who's worked for us for a long time, but he's new in his current role, Michael Corrigan, and Rory Toomey, who's our new director of marketing, and all of those people are bringing, new, fresh ideas. Some of this is pre them, but I think just sort of the synergy of, being where we are and going forward is, for us, we're super excited.
Yeah.
We're killing it.
Yeah, shaking it up seems to be a little bit of a rejuvenation for you guys.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but that is certainly a piece of it, and it's nice to. I think we all like that feeling of winning.
Right. And definitely sort of a compare and contrast moment from last year, where you guys were actually down for the first time in the company's history, down 3%. Right. You said that some of that was due to building out Asheville and capacity management, that was sort of intentional. But how much of it do you feel was just a result of the competitiveness and the growing competitiveness of the craft segment? And it's really getting pretty saturated out there.
Yeah, you industry media types got to scratch that itch. That's true. We had everybody working their butts off trying to get this incredible place up and out of the ground and making beer, and we had a hard stop on our capacity, and we pulled a lot of rabbits out of the hat to try to squeeze more barrels here and there, and had people 14, 12, and 13, we put $30 million worth of investments in capacity in Fort Collins, knowing that we were doing this too, because we couldn't figure out how to do that and do this if we didn't do that.
Right.
And that's not just, hey, could you drop off some tanks and put them in? There's a whole process of engineering that goes with that. So we have a staff of, we have a silly number of engineers, but they're trying to do that project and this project, and we're not sure when this project will really be up and producing. So it certainly was some amount of, shit,
yeah.
We may not have capacity for all of this. And, it's not a secret. The industry is harder.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people getting in the business. I think bigger brands seem, less, they're more ubiquitous, and people don't see them as being as cute or something. We
Right.
think we're pretty cute, but we understand other people might not think so. So, yeah, it's a combination of things.
So how do you guys work through that? How does a company like New Belgium kind of push past some of those hurdles?
The hurdles of capacity versus
I think
selling out in the trade, or more just the trade side of it?
The point that you mentioned about, I guess, consumers not feeling like New Belgium is still the sort of small, cute brand that they want to support. How do you move past that and go from 3% down, to 7 to 10% up this year?
Well, one of the very first things you do is make sure that you're making really good beer. And not every new brewer out there, I'm sad to report, is making really good beer. And I think beer drinkers do appreciate being able, whether it's, I'm not just talking, I'm from New Belgium, so of course that's what I'm going to talk about, but whether it's New Belgium or Sierra or Bell's or many brewers who I consider close friends, it takes a lot of investment in people, in process, in equipment to make very good beer. And a lot of in the field, I'm sure he's not here, but I need to give a shout out to my pal Matt Meadows, who runs our field QA program, because we have the largest team of field QA people in any craft brewery in the United States.
How big is it?
12 last I knew, but I'm guessing it's probably 4. We posted a job. Michael's saying 14.
Wow.
So we take that shit seriously.
Yeah.
And so that's one. And then another is sort of getting your blocking and tackling right. And a third, and this is sort of the magic one that I think we have real potential with. There was a Nielsen thing where beer drinkers were asked about local, and they said that there were some other things that were proxy for local. And one of those were, sort of interesting business models. And that was where the Nielsen thing stopped, so the Kim Jordan interpretation of that was like, yes, because I think we have a really interesting business model. Right. And we've worked hard to, to be the kind of company that we are enthusiastically and, crazy about.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting story it's an interesting story for business people for sure.
Yep.
But the things everyone knows that story, so I'm not going to go into it. But the things that we do, I think, are interesting, and we're going to need to figure out how we use what we're already doing in communities locally all over the U.S. as sort of a launch point for making those more local connections.
Right. And you mentioned the business model, obviously the employee stock ownership program. Certainly seeing some more breweries take a look at that model as well and gravitate towards it. Long term, I guess, can a brewery stay in that type of a model forever, or does there have to be, some sort of liquidity event at some point for an ESOP company? I mean, we saw that with Full Sail early, I guess, last year.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't say definitively. I absolutely know, or, then it's sort of like I'm making stuff up and trying to sell that to you. But my sense of it is that if you're responsible about your repurchase obligation, which means that, we do, this is really geeky. We do an actuarial study every other year where we figure out, how many people are likely to retire in the next 5 years. So we have a rolling forecast of that, and we make sure that we have that amount of money plus some, in our pot of money for the ESOP, so that we're never left, we're not socking away capital that's sitting and doing nothing. But on the flip side, we have cash in the larder, if you will, so that when the time comes that those people leave, we feel entirely comfortable that we can pay them. And, I guess the part that makes me say I'm not exactly sure about it is this is a new and different model, and we really believe that the opportunity for Americans to own something is becoming, there's becoming a bigger and bigger gap between the people who can own things and the people who can't. Right. And that matters to us, and it motivates us. And so we're going to continue, for now, at this point in our corporate lives, to really embrace that and push it forward.
Right. Speaking of people who own things, 4,600 breweries now in the country, more than 4,600. If we're still working at a rate of, 1.5, 2 per day here, we'll be pretty close to 5,000 soon, which is, certainly a nice milestone, I guess, and will be nice for the Brewers Association to promote. It's a nice round number. But you look at, also sort of the growth trends for craft as a category, and probably looking at somewhere between 26, 27 million barrels this year. So my really crummy back-of-the-envelope journalist math tells me that that's about 5,500 barrels per company. Now, obviously, we know it's not that, but the idea is that, you know, you're slicing the pie in so many different ways now.
Yeah.
And breweries, you know, the question really is, can a brewery business model that's built on having such smaller amounts of production and perhaps selling direct or, you know, over their bar, how sustainable is that as more companies come into the space?
Well, that's, you know, the big question for all of us, right? And I wish I could say, oh, the answer is 7 for sure, because at New Belgium, if we're not sure what the answer is, we always say it's 7. So, but, you know, a couple of things. Averages are always misleading because you've got the people who are, you know, making 1,500 barrels a year, and you've got people like New Belgium and Sierra making quite a bit more than that.
Like I said, crummy journalist math.
Yeah. And I would take a slight deviation and say that I think, you know, when so craft is up, it's close to 7.5, almost 8 for the year. And in the last 13 weeks, 5.3. And what we hear is the bloom is off the rose, and we've jumped the shark. And by the way, if you're not clear about the term jump the shark, go ahead and Google it sometime, because it has to do with Fonzie and Hawaii. Anyway, I digress. But I don't think, you know, distributors make a lot of money off of craft, and it's been the best thing to happen to the beer industry in a very long time. And I think that it's, you know, we want to do this sort of virtuous spiral, not the, you know, 7% for the year is not jumping the shark in my mind. Right. And I just think it's important. Words matter. And I think it's important that we all remember that.
Right.
That was my little digression. Back to the topic at hand. I think business models matter. You're going to have those people who are going to do 2,000 barrels, you know, and have a tasting room model, and that's what they want to do. And then you're going to have people like us who, I mean, we've had more than 100 conversations in our lifetime about grow, no grow. And the reason we decided to grow was we recognized that it provided opportunity for our coworkers to do interesting things. If you don't grow, everyone sits in the same job until they get bored and they go somewhere else.
Right.
So that was our reason for growing. It's a step function business. So you get up close to the top of your capacity and you're like, sweet, people love our beer. We're gonna, you know, build another brew house. And, you know, maybe we're gonna quadruple our size. And then now we have to go into new markets because, you know, we've got all of this debt service on our new brew house. Right. And shit, what are we gonna do about that? And so sometimes I think that tail wags the dog. And
it worked for a few years.
And for
a lot of companies.
You know, I think, so that's one dynamic. I think quality is another dynamic. I think my boyfriend, Dick Cantwell, is the quality ambassador for the Brewers Association. And, you know, so we are looking under the hoods of a lot of organizations across the U.S. And some of it, you know, some of it is a bit shocking. People who have no idea, you know, about putting fruit in the cold side and, you know, pasteurization of that fruit before it goes in the cold side is not even a consideration. And like, I'm sorry, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there are a lot of dynamics at play. And Vinny and Natalie Chilurzo were at my house last week, so we had some nice opportunity to sit on the patio and drink beer. And one of the things we were talking about is people making sure that they're doing the things that make them happy and that they like to do. Like, do you like going to make distributor calls or going to talk with chain buyers, you know, at any particular outlet. Some people really like that, which is fabulous. Would you prefer meeting with beer drinkers where they are in bar stools? I think this step function nature gets us kind of wrapped around the axle of all of a sudden we're doing things that maybe are not the things we really wanted to do. And it will eventually sort itself out.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up Vinny and Natalie. Russian River, by the way, I'm assuming everybody knows that. But Natalie actually gave or moderated a talk at CBC this year entitled Staying Small and Beautiful. And, for so many years, I feel like Russian River has really done that. Pulling back capacity or pulling back distribution, adding capacity, focusing on delivering beer pretty much just to California. Although I did see some on tap in San Diego, and I was pretty surprised about that because I thought mostly Northern California for all their stuff. But they've found a way, over the last few years to stay small and beautiful, but they're sort of turning that on its head now, and they're growing as well, and they're embarking on an expansion, and I don't know exactly what their strategy will be, but I would assume that when you expand, there will be some additional distribution opportunities for their beers, whether that's in California or elsewhere. They're certainly sort of taking that next step. So, I guess if we're talking about 5,000 breweries, how many of them will be able to resist the temptation to grow and stay small and beautiful and do it successfully?
That's the big question. And it's also sort of weird. So I'm sitting here saying, oh, they should stay small and beautiful. And you can imagine they're thinking like, easy for you to say.
As you
like,
cross over 1 million barrels, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not counseling anyone to do something that is different than the thing that makes them happy. All I was saying is, I think it's worth the time to be reflective and do a little introspection and make sure you're doing what you're doing because it's really what you want to do. They have a plan, and it may, we've talked about it, and it makes sense to me. And they've done a really good job of stewarding their brands, making really, really good beer. They're a bit of an exception or an outlier, perhaps, not the rule. But I do think, it will right itself. And I think I can say about New Belgium that we feel like, we've modeled out different growth scenarios, different profitability, where are the points, where the pain points for us. So, but we have enough people that we can do that and really organize ourselves around all of that information and plan with our coworkers, because we are big plan with our coworkers kinds of people. We just had our retreat where everyone who works for New Belgium comes back, to the mothership, and we have 2 amazing days of, sharing information about, everything from soup to nuts. So while, you never want to see those hiccup phases, I guess I have to also say I want to make sure that we're serving the most delicious, interesting, well-made, made with some real passion for not only beer, but American independent craft brewers. And, you see people who get into it for reasons that are different than that. And I want to see the good guys win.
Right. You wouldn't like to see them hang around if there ever were a shakeout.
You hope the marketplace takes care of that. And generally it does. It has a way of working these things out. And, then of course we haven't talked about the other, we talked a bit about how when we write about beer as if the craft beer specifically, as if the bloom is on the rose, we're off the rose, we're sort of starting this downward spiral. The people who may really like that, although, they have reason to not like it too, are the very largest brewers who would like to get all of this, interest and share of stomach and, accolade for themselves.
Yeah. Well,
So that's another dynamic, that on the one hand, we're, doing this here and, kind of encouraging these people to do a better job of what they do. And yeah, it's complicated.
yeah, it certainly is. And I don't think that anybody's going to have, a right answer when asked. It's
No.
all sort of speculative and interesting to talk about. Which ultimately
I'm
is...
making it up as I go along, Chris.
Oh, you could have fooled me.
Okay.
So, I guess switching gears a little bit and thinking about the way that the category has evolved. We've talked about how many new companies have entered the space. Certainly, the business in general seems to be more professionalized across the board, whether it's a company the size of New Belgium or somebody making 10,000 barrels of beer a year. Everybody is a little bit more buttoned up. What sort of impact is, the amount of craft brands, all trying to go to market in a very professional way, having on the other tiers? What impact is the saturation, if it is oversaturated, having on wholesalers and retailers? What are you guys seeing?
So Christine and I were having beers with a distributor from Florida, and they said that 93% of their volume for their house came from 10, they use the word suppliers, which just makes my blood boil, brewers. We call them brewers where we are because that's what we don't supply, we brew. 93% of their volume came from 10 brewers. 98% of their volume came from 15 brewers. So they have 120 brewers in their house. So 105 brewers make up 2% of their volume.
Wow.
And so my next question, I'm just some irreverent in a way that's sometimes bad, was, and I'm sure they want the same attention that those 15 brewers get, and they were like, absolutely. So it creates a huge strain on the distribution network, some of which they perhaps have brought on themselves
Absolutely.
by not being more discerning and by not, in the old days, I don't think this is true anymore, but in the old days, I sound like in my time, Sonny.
Yeah.
In the old days, distributors would take on brands and breweries because they didn't want their competitor to have them.
Right.
It had nothing to do with actually wanting to sell their beer. It had to do with not letting anyone else sell their beer.
And that's not the case anymore. I mean, they're
I think
turning brands away.
I think that's much less the case, and I think they need to do it more, and I think that will spring up even more boutique distributors than we have now, which will be a good thing, and some of those people will make it in the market, and some of them won't, and that's the nature of capitalism in America. It's kind of how it's supposed to work. You work hard, you do the good things, you win more most of the time. We all
business.
hope.
Yep, that's business.
Yeah.
Now thinking about the retailers, I mean, I've heard stories about, one place in particular, Kansas City, which, nothing against Kansas City, it's a great place, but it's a pretty small town compared to, major metro markets. And, I heard just a few years ago, there was something like 15 salespeople there, and now there's like 200. And
Brewery
sales representatives.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, that's 200 people roaming around the streets of Kansas City, knocking on doors and, trying to get attention from a buyer. So I can only imagine, what impact the growth of craft is having on just their time and their ability to, sort of parse things and figure out what to put on
You
tap
mean
or on their shelves.
retailers? Yeah,
Um,
sure.
So I guess how do you, if you're deploying your sales guys, how do you coach them on going out there and, I guess getting to the front of the line ahead of those other 200 people in Kansas City that are trying to get attention?
That's, it's a tough thing. I mean, I think one of the things you need to do is have people who are really nice and fun to be with, I mean, I know that seems weird, but people who are enjoyable to be with tend to get the attention of buyers more than people who aren't. You obviously have to have strong brands. Figuring out, I'm looking at Michael because he's probably over there banging his head against the wall. You have to have focus. What are the, how do you figure out what are the important things and what aren't the important things? And I also think you have to figure out what are your must-win markets. Is Kansas City your must-win market? If you're in some concentric number of miles from that place, it probably is. If you're in San Diego and you're a 60,000 barrel brewery and you're selling in Kansas City, I think it's good to sort of ask yourself, why are we here? And does this really make sense for us? But yeah, it's a crowded market out there. And, we also talk about kind of along the lines of that local thing. How do we make sure that, what we're doing is fresh and something that people haven't seen before? Because, great, we're going to give away some T-shirts and, touch tables.
Yeah, the promotional initiatives and the marketing endeavors now, I mean, tap takeovers have sort of come and gone.
Yeah.
They had their time. I still see them every once in a while. And I'm actually when I go to a bar, I'm a little disappointed when I see a tap takeover.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to experience multiple brands. And I would imagine that, a lot of consumers feel the same way. What are some ways that a company can rethink the traditional marketing endeavors or marketing campains?
I can't tell you that, Chris.
Come on, give us all the secrets.
We're always looking, and I honestly, I'm not trying to duck the question. It was probably, I'm looking for some sales folks, 8 years ago or so, we did some have a bunch of guys in costumes from 1554 run into a brewery and or run into a bar and do a little skit and do a couple of little things and hand out some beers and then leave, and people would be like, what the hell was that? So
sounds like it might work today, actually.
It might have been an idea whose time had not yet come, so we'll look for that event. And we also did some things with bringing canoes in and sitting in them for blue paddle and riding bikes through. Yeah. So it could happen again. I'm looking at Rory to see if he's weeping in the back there. But,
getting more creative, it sounds.
You have to be creative, and, that's up to every one of us. That's kind of the magic of the thing. And it's up to all of you who are doing this to figure out what your gig is that just really lights the spark with beer drinkers for you.
Right. So we're talking a little bit about, I guess, kind of what breweries today need to do differently in order to succeed, whether it's marketing, their expansion decisions. I mean, sort of tying it all together, it's really the thought process around becoming a successful brewery if you're a, sort of newer entrepreneur in this space. And, I'm sure you've been faced with a lot of these same decisions. Certainly the marketplace was at a different point when you guys faced them, whether it was do we stay or do we grow? Do we add more salespeople? Do we, take on another CapEx project?
Yeah, we've had those iterations many, many times.
Yep. So what's the thought process like specifically when you're thinking about deploying capital? Is it, okay, I can buy some tanks or a salespeople? I mean, how do you work through those tough decisions that a lot of people in the room are going to face if they're not already facing it now, very soon?
Well, those are two sort of broadly different strategies, because one of them is on your balance sheet and one of them is on your P&L. And for us, because we have always had more market that we could go into, when we decided that we were going to build a brewery on the East Coast, it's because we had very recently, very near the time of our decision to ship beer to Georgia and North Carolina and South Carolina, we said we're only going to do that if we someday build a brewery on the East Coast, because we're not going to ship beer from Colorado forever. But we had the luxury of having other markets, and we had already embraced the notion that we wanted to grow. I actually wonder sometimes, are more salespeople the answer? Because I'm not sure, is it salespeople or is it more sort of field marketing, or, I think everybody's mix in that is unique to them. And the market has changed so many times. You hear lots of stories of bigger breweries who are putting together tasting rooms and small brew pubs, and, the marketplace has changed so much that the thing that was a sure thing 5 years ago could look comically out of date today.
In terms of execution, or in terms of product innovation, or all of it? Or
in terms of building pull.
Right.
Building brand strength.
Right. So that being said, if you had to do it all over again in today's environment, what would you do differently? And would you still aim, or can somebody still aim to build a company into what New Belgium has become? Or do they have to just, be okay with staying small and beautiful?
For New Belgium, for me personally, I like to learn from things we've done, well, that didn't work out so well, or that thing, was the shit. However, I think it's a waste of time to say, oh, if I had it to do all over again, I would. Because the fact is, here we are, and like this brewery, it's done pretty much, and we're not going to do that all over again. So it's good to learn from things you've done, but to spend much time in regret seems like a waste of time. Right. For me. For other breweries, one of the things we haven't really talked about much anyway is that dynamic of people who are in the industry because they're going to build a brewery, and 5 years later they're going to sell it and make a pile of money. I understand that that's a business model, and if you can figure out a way to do that and be successful and it works well for you, that's great.
Right.
I don't have much enthusiasm for it, because we started out as independent craft brewers in the United States of America, and that means something to me. Right. And so I feel like we're part of a community in that way. So what should people do? Be contemplative, figure out, I think there are rough waters ahead, and I would not counsel anyone who's debating the idea to jump right in and do it, because, it's pretty crowded right now, and unless you have, even if it weren't that way, I speak to a lot of entrepreneurial groups, and one of the things I always say is, be sure that you're going to love this thing that you're doing, because you have to do it a lot. And if you don't love it and you're dragging yourself to it every day to force yourself to do it, that's, this is it. This is the one life you have.
Right.
And you should love the thing you're doing.
Well, I think Greg Cook from Stone said something similar the other day about not getting into.
Greg and I are saying the same thing.
That's scary. Yeah. Yeah. Who would have ever thunk? Like you said 5 years ago,
I love that guy.
It's not just the same anymore. You can't do the same thing. No, he said something the other day about getting into an industry, any industry, during a boom time, and I think he related it to buying real estate. That's neither here nor there. I mean, he basically is thinking the same way. There's a lot of companies all duking it out right now. And it might not be the wisest thing to be starting a brewery at such a competitive time. So it sounds like you share similar sentiments.
Yeah, just from it's not going to be my money or my time or my investment. And so I want to be thoughtful about giving someone advice. And I think right now is kind of tough.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to say to anyone, oh, you should definitely do this, because there are a lot of reasons to take a pause and, make sure it's really the thing you want to do.
Right. All right, well, final question here for you before we take a short break, refill our glasses, and then come back with our last panel. You've talked a lot, actually, throughout this entire discussion about...
Did you just tell me I talk a
no,
lot?
No, you got to let me finish. See? You've talked a lot about, staying independent and sort of that feeling that you get being an independent company. And certainly, New Belgium has been thrown into the rumor mill plenty of times over the last year. And you mentioned having your employees out to Fort Collins. Big announcement there was that New Belgium is, in fact, not selling to anyone. I guess, what did you consider throughout that process? You guys meet with, very smart financial types. What did you consider throughout that process? What did you learn from them about, what's going on out there in the world of M&A? And are you going to stay independent forever?
Well, let me start with the last one first. Years and years ago, I learned that saying that you're never or always going to do something makes you look really ridiculous later when you change your mind. So I would never say that we are never or always going to be independent or otherwise. I think that as the board of directors and the executive management group of New Belgium, that we have an obligation to our shareholders, who also happen to be our nearly 800 coworkers, to make sure that we're looking at the strategic options. And that's really what motivated us. It was like, wow, the marketplace is changing, and we need to go on this multi-country death march of fun to meet some of these people and sort of understand what's going on in the world. So that was our motivation. What did we learn? I think we learned that there are people who are in this business who love beer, and there are people in this business who couldn't care less about beer. And the people who loved beer were people that we felt a lot closer to, and the people who, it's a factory and it makes this thing, and, were not so much our type. We learned that the thing that turns us on might be at high risk of not being something that we were going to be able to continue to have turn us on. And after 25 years of saying yes to the things that make us happy and excited or scared, but joyful, it sort of felt like we weren't really interested in having that trade-off.
Sounds like you guys took a pretty serious look at it.
I think so.
And a multi-country march, maybe some international buyers in there.
I believe Death March was what I
sorry.
said, yes. Yes. Good times, baby.
Well, Kim, on that note, thank you very much. And big round of applause for Kim. And cheers.
Cheers.
Mine's almost out, which is a good sign.
Thank you so much.
Which is a good sign that it was a good conversation. And let's get a beer. We'll be back in 20 minutes with our next panel.